Trump said, "We have all the cards. Iran left Islamabad and flew to Russia. China built the reason Iran can." There is a sequence of events from Saturday that I keep returning to, not because any single one of them is shocking on its own, but because when you put them in the correct order, they tell you something about who is actually holding the cards in this war that no Truth Social post is going to tell you. Here is the sequence. Friday night, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi arrives in Islamabad. Pakistan has spent weeks setting up this moment. The Serena Hotel is locked down for the fourth time. Security cordons seal off the red zone. Pakistan's prime minister, army chief, and foreign minister all sit with Araghchi personally. Hours of meetings, Iran comes with a framework, a paper, a proposal for how to end this war. Saturday morning, the White House announces that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are heading to Islamabad. This is confirmed by Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on Fox News. She says there has been progress. She says the administration is hopeful. She says the president directed the trip personally. Saturday afternoon, Araghchi leaves Islamabad. He does not wait. He does not leave a delegation behind to meet Witkoff and Kushner when they land. He hands his framework to the Pakistani mediators and he walks out the door. His next stop is Muscat, Oman. After that, Moscow. Within minutes of Araghchi's departure being confirmed, Trump cancels the trip. Witkoff and Kushner never board the plane. Trump tells Fox News that he saw no point in sending them on an 18-hour flight. He tells Axios, "We have all the cards. We are not going to go there to sit around talking about nothing." And then here is the detail that almost nobody is leading with. Trump told reporters later in the afternoon that Iran's paper was not good enough, but then he added something extraordinary. "They gave us a paper that should have been better, and interestingly, the minute I canceled it, within 10 minutes, we got a new paper that was much better. They offered a lot, but not enough." Read that again, slowly. Iran submitted a paper. Trump canceled the trip. 10 minutes later, Iran submitted a better paper. Trump said it still was not enough. But Iran submitted a better paper within 10 minutes of Trump walking away from the table. That is not the behavior of a country that has no cards. That is not the behavior of a country in chaos, with fractured leadership, with nobody knowing who is in charge. A country with no cards does not have a better offer ready within 10 minutes. A country with no cards does not walk out of Islamabad and fly to Oman and then Moscow. A country with no cards does not have a three-leg diplomatic tour lined up before the American delegation even decides whether to board its plane. I want to spend today explaining exactly what happened in Islamabad on Saturday, why Araghchi is in Oman and then Russia, why China is at the center of all of it, even though China was not in the room, and what all the cards framing gets wrong about where this negotiation actually stands. Let me start with what the paper said, or rather, what we know about what it said, because the contents have not been officially disclosed by either side. What we know comes from senior officials speaking to CNN, Axios, NPR, and Reuters. The framework Araghchi presented through the Pakistani mediators had one central precondition. Iran will not negotiate under blockade. The blockade must be lifted at minimum temporarily before formal talks can begin. That is Iran's stated position and has been since the blockade started on April 13th. America's position is equally clear. The blockade stays until Iran commits to surrendering its enriched uranium, not pausing enrichment, not limiting enrichment, handing over the physical uranium. Trump said it himself clearly, multiple times. The uranium that is, as he put it, very far into the ground thanks to Operation Midnight Hammer. America wants that uranium gone before the blockade comes off. So you have a situation where Iran says, lift the blockade to talk, and America says, surrender the uranium to lift the blockade. Those two positions are not close. They are not in the same diplomatic neighborhood. They describe two fundamentally different theories of what needs to happen first. And Araghchi, who has been negotiating with America for over a year, who sat across from Witkoff in Oman and Rome and Muscat in 2025, who understands exactly what American red lines look like, submitted a paper that Trump's own people described as not good enough, but then submitted a better one within 10 minutes. Here is what that tells me. Araghchi came to Islamabad with a paper he knew America would reject. He submitted it. He waited. He watched what happened. He left. And when Trump canceled the trip, within 10 minutes, a better paper appeared. That sequence tells you something about how Iran is negotiating. Iran is not coming with its maximum offer and hoping America says yes. Iran is coming with a paper designed to test where America's actual flexibility is, not where America says its red lines are. Those are different things. Diplomats do this all the time. You submit a position you know is unacceptable to see how the other side responds to unacceptable. Because how someone responds to no tells you more about their negotiating space than how they respond to yes. Trump canceled the trip. That told Iran something. Then Iran submitted a better paper. That told America something. The negotiation is happening, just not at the table anyone expected. Now let me talk about where Araghchi went next, because this is the part of Saturday's story that is getting the least attention and deserves the most. Araghchi flew to Muscat, Oman. He is meeting with Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi. Oman has been the key backchannel for U.S.-Iran communication since the 2025 negotiations began. Every round of indirect talks went through Oman. It was in Oman that Witkoff and Araghchi first sat in separate rooms and passed messages through Omani mediators in April 2025. The second round went through Rome. The third through Muscat again. Each time Oman facilitated the channel that America and Iran could not open directly. Araghchi going to Oman immediately after leaving Islamabad is not a consolation visit. It is not a face-saving tour. It is the continuation of the real channel. Oman is where proposals get tested before they become official positions. Oman is where the gap between public statements and private flexibility gets measured. The fact that Araghchi flew to Muscat on Saturday means Iran has something it wants to communicate to America through the channel that has always worked better than any face-to-face meeting. And it means Iran is communicating it while Trump is telling reporters he has all the cards and Iran can call anytime. And then from Oman, Araghchi is going to Moscow. That is the part I want to sit with for a moment. Because Moscow means something specific right now that it did not mean even 3 weeks ago. Russia has been Iran's most vocal international defender since the war began on February 28th. Lavrov condemned the strikes on day one, called them unprovoked aggression in violation of international law, and pledged Russia's assistance. Russia vetoed the UN Security Council resolution on Hormuz alongside China. Russia's oil revenues have doubled in March because Iranian oil being blocked from other routes drove up the global price. Russia has a $9 billion nuclear reactor deal with Iran. And according to The Week reporting this week, during Araghchi's visit to Moscow, the Kremlin is expected to revive an offer to take custody of part of Iran's uranium stockpile. Read that last sentence carefully. Russia is prepared to physically hold Iranian uranium. That is the proposal that may emerge from Moscow this weekend. Why does that matter? Because one of America's core demands is that Iran's enriched uranium be removed from Iranian territory. America does not want Iran to have 460 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% sitting in underground facilities that American bombs may or may not have fully destroyed. America wants that uranium gone, and Russia is now potentially offering to take it, store it, guarantee it, keep it under Russian custody where it cannot be turned into a weapon without Russia's knowledge and cooperation. That offer, if Russia formally makes it in Moscow, changes the structure of the negotiation completely. Because it gives Iran a way to say yes to the uranium removal demand without saying yes to America. Iran does not give the uranium to America. Iran does not give it to the IAEA under American-designed protocols. Iran gives it to Russia, a country that has been defending Iran since day one, a country that Iran trusts, a country whose custody of the uranium would satisfy the technical non-proliferation requirement while simultaneously being a humiliation for American diplomacy. And America cannot simply say no to the Russian custody offer without explaining why it prefers no deal to a deal that solves its stated problem through a different mechanism. If America's stated problem is Iran having weapons-grade uranium on its soil, and Russia offers to remove it and America says no, then America's stated problem is not actually the problem. And that contradiction would be very difficult to explain internationally. This is where China enters the picture. And this is what the title of this video is actually about. China did not cancel any trips this weekend. China was not in Islamabad. China has not made any dramatic statements about Saturday's failed talks. China is doing what it has been doing since the war began. China is coordinating quietly. China is building the structure that makes Iran's current position possible. On April 24th, just 2 days before Araghchi flew to Islamabad, China and Russia and Iran held a joint trilateral meeting with IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi in Vienna. Let me say that again. 3 days before the Islamabad talks, the three countries that form the axis of resistance to American demands on Iran's nuclear program sat down together with the head of the International Nuclear Agency and aligned their position. Washington Institute for Near East Policy tracked it. House of Saud analysis called it institutional choreography. That is the phrase I want you to hold on to. Not a coincidence, not a reaction. A choreography. And what does China's role in that choreography look like? China is simultaneously the country that brokered the April 8 ceasefire, the country buying 985,000 barrels of Iranian crude per day through the blockade, the country whose ships transit Iran's approved Hormuz corridor while America's blockade technically runs, the country that intercepted a ship to Iran with what Trump called top secret materials and then said no to America's anger about it. And now the country that Iran is exploring as a guarantor for whatever agreement eventually emerges, China as a guarantor. Think about what that means. If China agrees to guarantee an Iran nuclear deal, China becomes co-author of the most significant arms control arrangement in the Middle East since the original NPT. America has to negotiate not just with Iran, but with China's guarantee. Every verification mechanism, every inspection protocol, every enforcement trigger has to be acceptable to a Chinese guarantor. American unilateral exit from the deal, as happened with the JCPOA in 2018, becomes structurally impossible without Chinese agreement. And here is the historical irony that I think is worth sitting with. The JCPOA collapsed in 2018 precisely because Trump walked away from it unilaterally. That unilateral exit is the reason Iran does not trust American guarantees today. That exit is the reason Iran demands its uranium go to Russia rather than to America. That exit is the reason China's guarantorship becomes necessary. Trump's decision in 2018 created the exact structural condition that now requires China to be in the room for any deal to be credible. America's own past behavior has given China its current leverage. That is what China has built. Not a military position, not an overt confrontation with America. A structural dependency that gives China veto power over the outcome of an American military campaign without China firing a single shot. China spent 8 years watching Trump walk away from Obama's deal. China spent those 8 years deepening its relationship with Iran, buying Iranian oil, providing diplomatic cover, vetoing UN resolutions, and now, when Iran needs a guarantor that is not America, China is the only country with the trust, the economic relationship, and the UN Security Council seat to fill that role. China built that position long before this war started. The war just made the position visible. Trump says we have all the cards. But the card that decides whether this war ends in a deal or resumes in bombs is currently being discussed in a trilateral meeting in Vienna, in a foreign minister's office in Muscat, and in a Kremlin hallway in Moscow. And America is not in any of those rooms. Let me now steelman Trump's position, because it deserves a genuine examination, not a dismissal. Trump is right that economic pressure is accumulating on Iran. The internet blackout is at 55 days and running. The Iranian rial has lost significant value. Military losses have been real, with 3,400 confirmed dead since February 28th. Nuclear facilities were struck. The IRGC has taken casualties. Karg Island storage is filling up, and some oil wells may need to be shut in if storage runs out. Iran is losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day in oil revenue it cannot fully replace, even with the shadow fleet running at capacity. And the blockade numbers are real. U.S. Central Command confirmed on Saturday that 37 ships have been redirected by the U.S. Navy since the blockade began on April 13th. 37. 3 have been physically seized. The Sivan was sanctioned on Friday and intercepted in the Arabian Sea on Saturday, escorted back toward Iran the same day it was added to the Treasury's list. The blockade is not theoretical. It is operational. Ships are being turned around. And Trump is right that Iran's leadership has a communication problem at the top. Mojtaba Khamenei is injured. His communication has been limited. The New York Times reported he was seriously wounded, but mentally sharp. His official account on X posted a statement criticizing what it called the enemy's media operations, seeking to undermine unity. That is a defensive post. You make that post when you are worried the narrative is working. Trump is also right that the 10 minutes to better paper dynamic suggests Iran has more flexibility than its public positions indicate. A country with genuinely no room to move does not have a better paper ready within 10 minutes. The flexibility is there. The gap between what Iran is publicly demanding and what Iran might privately accept may be narrower than the blockade-first framing suggests. Here is where the Steelman breaks down. The problem is not Iran's willingness to negotiate. The problem is what America is actually asking for. America is asking Iran to surrender its uranium before the blockade is lifted. That is, sequentially asking Iran to make its biggest concession before America makes any concession at all. And Iran's position, which Araghchi has stated clearly and consistently, is that this sequence is designed not for negotiation, but for capitulation. Araghchi told reporters in Islamabad that Iran will not engage in forced negotiations under pressure and threats. That is Iran's president's language, confirmed by state broadcaster IRIB on Saturday. And here is the deeper problem with the sequencing. Iran gave up its uranium in 2015 as part of the JCPOA. It shipped low-enriched uranium to Russia as part of that deal. It accepted international inspections. It reduced its centrifuge count. It did every technical thing America asked. And in 2018, Trump walked away anyway, unilaterally, without Iran violating a single provision of the agreement. The IAEA confirmed Iran's compliance right up until the American exit. So Iran's current refusal to surrender the uranium before the blockade is lifted is not stubbornness. It is institutional memory. Iran has been in this position before. Iran made the concessions in 2015, and the concessions did not protect Iran from American pressure. They just made Iran weaker when the pressure came back. Araghchi was part of the team that negotiated the JCPOA. He knows exactly what surrendering the uranium first and trusting American guarantees produced last time. He is not going to produce the same result with the same method. That is the structural problem that no phone call is going to solve. Trump said Saturday that future negotiations will happen by telephone. They can call us anytime they want, he said. But Iran has a stated requirement that the blockade be lifted as a precondition for talks. And America has a stated requirement that the uranium be surrendered before the blockade is lifted. A phone call does not resolve that sequence problem. A phone call is just two people restating their preconditions in a different medium at lower travel cost. What resolves the sequence problem is a third party who can provide enough guarantees to allow both sides to move simultaneously rather than sequentially. Iran surrenders the uranium to Russia at the same moment America lifts the blockade. Both concessions happen at the same time. Neither side goes first, neither side capitulates. Both sides can tell their domestic audiences that the other side moved first, because in a simultaneous exchange, you can credibly claim the other side moved first from any angle you choose to describe it from. That is the structure Araghchi may be building in Moscow this weekend. And China guaranteeing the outcome is the mechanism that makes it credible to Iran. Because Iran does not trust American guarantees after 2018. But Iran trusts Russian custody and Chinese guarantorship. And Russia and China are both in this together, as the Vienna trilateral meeting 3 days ago demonstrated. Trump said, "We have all the cards." But the card that breaks the deadlock is being dealt in Moscow. I am not telling you that this deal will happen. I am not predicting a timeline. What I am telling you is that the structure of how a deal could happen is more visible today than it has been at any point since the ceasefire began. And that structure does not run through Washington. It runs through Muscat, Moscow, and Beijing, with Islamabad as the room where Iran and America eventually shake hands on something those other cities made possible. Trump canceled the trip. Iran submitted a better paper 10 minutes later. Iran flew to Russia. China was already in Vienna, coordinating 3 days before any of this. Who has all the cards is the question. But maybe the more useful question is who built the deck. And here is what I want you to watch in the coming days. Araghchi is in Oman right now. He goes to Moscow next. If Russia formally proposes custody of Iran's uranium in Moscow, and if China confirms its role as guarantor through back channels, then when Araghchi returns to Islamabad, which Iran's own IRNA news agency says will happen as early as Sunday night, he will return with a different kind of paper. Not a paper designed to test American flexibility. A paper backed by Russian custody and Chinese guarantorship, a paper that solves America's stated problem through a mechanism America did not control. Trump will then have to decide whether to accept a deal that ends the war but gives Russia and China a structural role in Middle East nuclear governance, or reject it and resume a bombing campaign against a country that has demonstrated it can seize ships, collect tolls, and coordinate a 3-continent diplomatic tour in the middle of an active American blockade. That is the actual choice coming. Not whether Iran calls, not whether Witkoff flies to Pakistan. The actual choice is whether America accepts a deal it did not author or resumes a war it has not won. Trump said we have all the cards. But the cards that matter this weekend are being played in Muscat and Moscow, and they were shuffled in Beijing long before Saturday morning. Let me tell you what to watch specifically in the next 48 to 72 hours, because this situation is moving fast and the next signal will tell us a great deal about which direction this goes. Watch what Russia announces after the Araghchi meeting in Moscow. If Russia formally proposes taking custody of Iranian uranium, that is a structural breakthrough, even if nobody calls it that publicly. If Russia and Iran issue a joint statement that does not mention the uranium custody idea, it means that proposal is still being worked privately and Araghchi is taking it back to Tehran for authorization. Watch whether Araghchi actually returns to Islamabad on Sunday night, as IRNA reported. If he returns, it means Iran came back from Moscow with something new to put on Pakistan's table. If he does not return, it means the Moscow meeting produced nothing that changes Iran's negotiating position and the stalemate deepens. Watch the oil price. Brent crude above $100 means markets believe the blockade holds. Brent crude dropping toward 90 means markets are pricing in a deal. The market is reading the same tea leaves I am describing to you right now, and the market has access to information through shipping data and commodity flows that no press conference can match. And watch Trump, not his Truth Social posts. Watch whether American officials quietly signal to Pakistan that a third-party custody arrangement for the uranium is something Washington could discuss. That signal will not come publicly. It will come through the Pakistani mediators. But if it comes, everything changes. If you found this useful, push back on it in the comments. I will see you in the next one.